Alright, let's talk about the giant, ugly number that nobody wants to deal with, America's national debt. Right now, we're sitting at over $34 trillion. That's 100 grand per American citizen. And guess what? That number is never going down. So what happens if one day the US just says, well, screw it, we're not paying it? If America defaulted on its debt, would the entire economy collapse? Would the dollar become worthless? Or would we finally break free from a broken system? So today, we're diving into what a US default would actually look like, who would be hit the hardest, and whether America is already on the economic time bomb. All right. Before we talk about the default, let's break down what the US debt actually is. Because I know what some of you are thinking, who do we even owe all this money to? Here's the quick version. The government spends more than it earns. So it borrows money by issuing treasury bonds. People, banks, and countries buy those bonds because they've seen as safe investments. Right now, the US pays over $1 trillion a year just in interest on that debt. So the US is paying more in interest than it spends on defense. And who actually owns all that debt? Americans and US institutions like Social Security, pensions, and the banks, 66%. Foreign countries like China, Japan, 24%. Federal Reserve, 10%. Yeah, that's right. We owe most of this money to ourselves, which makes a default a slightly complicated scenario. Let's say Congress decides, screw it, we're not paying our debt anymore. What would happen next? Well, we will see immediate chaos in the financial markets. The stock market will instantly freefall. Treasury bonds will be worthless and investors will start to panic sell. US credit rating collapses, meaning that borrowing money in the future will get way more expensive. Well, fun fact, the US credit rating has already been downgraded once in 2011 because we just argued about the default. Government payments will freeze. So Social Security will be delayed or canceled. Federal worker pay, gone. Medicare, Medicaid, frozen. So yeah, if you thought the government shutdowns were bad, this will make 2008 look like a warm-up. And then the dollar will tank, causing inflation to skyrocket. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency, meaning countries trust it. If the US defaults, well, that trust disappears. And if the dollar loses value, imports become insanely expensive. Inflation goes through the roof. And this isn't some wild theory. This almost happened before. In 1979, just a tiny debt delay caused US interest rates to spike overnight. And if it happened again, just on a larger scale, we'd be looking at a global recession. Or worse. Well, if the US defaults, who suffers the most? Let's break this down. Retirees and pension holders. Because Social Security payments could stop. Pensions would collapse if treasury bonds lose value. And right now, over 60 million Americans rely on Social Security payments. So if you thought the boomers were mad about inflation, just wait until their retirement checks don't show up. And now let's look at investors and stock market. Stock portfolios get absolutely destroyed, especially for anyone holding the US bonds. Bank interest rates skyrocket, making it impossible to get loans. Crypto though might actually moon because people would flee the dollar, which means your Bitcoin friend might actually finally be right about something. And the middle class and small businesses. Mortgages would become unaffordable, businesses can get loans, layoffs skyrocket. And just like that, the average American takes the biggest hit, while the other rich, well, they'll find a way to profit from it. Okay, so would the US actually default? Short answer, probably not. Congress always rises the debt ceiling because the alternative is global economic suicide. The government can just print more money, which technically isn't defaulting, but it still causes inflation. And the US still holds the world reserve currency status, which means other countries need dollars to trade. So yeah, default isn't likely, but it's not impossible. And even if it ever did happen, well, we'll be looking at a completely different America. So let's play out the worst case scenario. What if the US defaulted and just never recovered? Well, the US dollar loses global power. Countries stop using dollar for trade, and China, Russia push for new global currency. The government prints more money to cover debts, causing hyperinflation, and everyday goods, gas, food, rent skyrocket in price. For example, hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, where 100 trillion banknotes become worthless. And that's how you get an economic collapse that changes the world forever. But hey, well, at least we wouldn't owe anyone any more money, right? The America is probably not going to default, not today and not tomorrow. But the fact we are even asking this question right now, that's the real warning sign. Because one day, whether it's default, inflation, or a total collapse, the system will break. And when it does, you don't want want to be the one left holding a worthless dollar. This is Strive Network. Comment, like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.